The happiest couple I've ever met. The couple to give hope to anyone who didn't believe in love. It came crashing down from their happy, cloudless blue sky. And it all began with an old, bitter woman. I arrived at JC's house, 5 p.m. sharp. She's always obsessing with time, questioning why you're a minute late or a minute early, as if she's a detective and you're in her interrogation room. A young woman with pitch black hair, dark clothing, a nose ring, and a few tattoos to go with it all. Her home decorated not too differently from herself, with pumpkins sitting on the porch in September, black wind chimes, and a very welcoming rug at the doorstep that reads, "Leave now." I felt special being the only person she trusted. Still, it took me a few knocks and even a reluctant ring of the doorbell to get her to answer. "Hey," I began, and in the awkward stare down she always initiated when that door opened.
"Isaac,"
she said, smiling.
"How are you?"
Good. Good, yourself?" She took a moment to trace the floor with her left foot.
"Good."
JC and I had planned a movie night. Well, as long as the movie wasn't too long, as she never allows anyone, even me, inside her home after 9:30 p.m. My nostrils were introduced to the scent of a fresh batch of cinnamon cookies. I had hoped that they were for me, for us, but JC brought back a bowl of popcorn and soda for the movie instead, which was fine. I certainly wasn't going to complain and then end up losing her trust for the next 2 decades. The movie ended. We thought Halloween 2 was okay. I gave myself a little tour while JC went upstairs to find another movie. I was glad she was willing to watch another, that she was beginning to open up and let her friends back into her life. I guess the boredom from all the loneliness she's been experiencing the past few years finally got to her. My eye caught a picture framed above a fireplace of JC and her ex-boyfriend Tyler. No one knows what happened between them. All we know is that one day they were together and the next day they weren't. After the breakup, Tyler simply disappeared and no one's seen him since. And the aftermath shows in JC's eyes.
"Saw 4?
JC waved a DVD from atop the stairs, awaiting my response. Sure. Somehow, over and despite the gore of Saw 4, JC slowly drifted away into a deep sleep. I wasn't really paying much attention to the movie anyway, so that was fine. And it was getting about time for me to leave soon. I made my way over to the kitchen for a glass of water. I noticed the time, 9:15 p.m. I thought I better get going soon, even if JC wasn't going to wake up in the next 15 minutes. I told myself that I'd wake her up before I left out of respect for her rules. I noticed a tray of cinnamon cookies on the counter and figured she wouldn't notice one missing anyway. I looked down the hallway before turning the sink on to see JC still asleep. I didn't want to make too much ruckus washing my hands, but it wasn't the sound of running water that woke her up. It was my scream. As I washed my hands, I made out the face of a man in the window in the front of the sink. I jumped back in shock with JC already running into the kitchen with questions.
What?
She demanded to know. "Call the cops," I said. "Someone tried to break into your house. I saw him through the window by the sink."
"What did he look like?"
I don't know. Definitely a man. I think he was white." She burst out into sudden laughter.
"No more movies tonight, Isaac. Time to go."
She said in a condescending tone she didn't believe me, or she wasn't taking it seriously. "I'm not leaving you here. You're not staying here alone."
"I'll be
Not happening," I sternly interrupted. JC finally noticed the time. Her expression subtly turned serious and she uncrossed her arms.
Oh no, Isaac, you have to go. You have to go now."
I poked my head to the side, looking out the kitchen. I saw the same man through the living room window this time. "Call the cops, he's right there!" JC looked back, she saw him too. A very loud and violent bang against the door rumbled throughout the house. She ran for the front door to make sure it was locked. Except she actually ran for the front door so I wouldn't look through the peephole. "Move, what are you doing? We gotta see this guy's face so we can describe him," I said.
"Isaac."
"What? Move."
Isaac, please.
Confusion hit me. Why won't you move, JC? Tears ran down her face, followed by trails of black eyeshadow. She seemed hopeless, like she had just given up, like she was finally ready to tell me something.
Isaac, do you remember that old woman? The one Tyler and I?
She covered her right hand with the sleeve of her sweater and dried her face.
The one me and Tyler visited.
Yeah, okay, what about her? JC and Tyler were as open-minded as they come. They dipped their toes into diverse pools of knowledge in religion, culture, science, you name it. They studied Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and anything else that sparked their interest. Which is why, at the request of a former friend, they decided to meet with the woman who claimed to possess certain abilities. A very old, serious, gray-haired woman whose shoulders almost met the back of her neck. She lived up in a mountain in absolute isolation. Although open-minded and always willing to listen, JC and Tyler couldn't help but laugh at the woman who claimed to be one of the last people on earth who knew how to practice real witchcraft. The woman did not react mercifully at their mocking and supposedly proved to JC and Tyler that she was in fact very real. It was a running joke that JC would tell us from time to time, even when Tyler left. They broke up immediately after meeting that old woman, but no one seriously thought that was her reasoning. JC. She looked up at me, still leaning against the door. What about the woman? What does she have to do with anything that's happening right now? Then the tears started. Then another very loud bang against the door. It was so strong that it rattled the locks and even shook some picture frames on the wall out of place. Okay, JC, move. Move now. I gently moved her away from the door so that I could see her through the hole.
Isaac, please.
I saw the stuff of nightmares. A man on the ground standing on all fours. Standing on his legs and hands, his crooked head looking up at the door. Shifting inhumanly fast. His eyes were pitch black, like JC's hair, and he was completely naked, with his ribcage poking against his skin. He was standing so close to the door that I was able to see every little detail. Then he, or it, opened its mouth to reveal cat-like teeth. I jumped back as it began to bang its head against the door again. I looked at JC, awaiting an explanation. She just looked back at me as if expecting me to figure it out myself, like I was supposed to know. Then she ran to the kitchen, and she came back with the tray of cinnamon cookies she had baked earlier. She placed her hand on the doorknob while using the other to carry the tray.
They're still his favorite.
What are you doing? Don't open the door. She opened the door and walked outside, closing it behind herself. I looked through the peephole, then ran to the living room to get a better look through the window. She was feeding it the cookies and petting it on the head. It rubbed against her legs. She kissed it on his forehead while it consumed everything she placed in front of it. Then, in a sight that made me jump back from the window, it suddenly ran off into the woods, moving incredibly fast. I just stared at JC as she walked back inside. She froze by the staircase, still waiting for me to say something. By then I had figured it out, and I let her know that I did.
Tyler always did like those cookies.
A few years ago, I was traveling through the Midwest and decided to stop at a marshland to eat my picnic lunch. I sat on a blanket in a section near the water and checked out my equipment, not seeing the old man coming over. He approached cautiously and smiled when I looked up. He apologized for startling me and asked what I was doing. When I told him that I planned to take some photos, he cautioned against going too deep into the grasslands. He told me that there had been a young serial killer who, 50 years earlier, had slaughtered over 20 people. Even though I'm not easily scared, the details around the fact that he buried them close by was still a little disturbing. After the old man left, I ignored his warnings. I went deeper into the grasslands, getting to enjoy the sun and the gentle breeze. I snapped many pictures, and while reviewing them, standing among the tall bulrushes, I saw a strange image. Enlarging one of the photos, I was shocked to see a long hand with bloody fingers poking up from the grass. At that moment, the wind cooled down, at least 15 degrees, and a weird sound came rushing from nowhere. It was like a dull roar building from the ground up. I lowered my camera and saw that dark clouds were swarming. Funnily enough, the sun was still shining in patches, while the dark sky moved like a kaleidoscope of patches. Fear started to grip me as I heard a deep groan coming from underneath my feet and spreading about 30 feet. I felt a rumble in the earth, and while I paid attention to the ground, I didn't notice the bulrushes shifting about. Then I felt more than just the grasses and bulrushes brushing my skin. I slowly looked up and screamed. At least 10 arms were waving among the bulrushes. Some of the hands were scratched like they'd been digging. And then I saw a skinny man with a bandaged head. He was naked and looked like he'd been stretched. His bandages covered the uppermost part of his neck and his head. Walking straight towards me, I saw his mouth murmuring, uttering words and sounds I couldn't understand. Too scared to turn and run for fear of the hands grabbing me and pulling me down. It seemed like a horror movie. Suddenly, a pair of hands grabbed my legs and tried to drag me down. I screamed and resisted, trying to escape. The murmuring man was now reaching his long arms towards me and grabbing at my face. I kicked and screamed. As I wrenched myself around, one of the hands dragged my camera from my neck and I slammed down hard. Now I was on the ground with many hands reaching out of the soil and ripping at my clothes and hair. I felt 2 hands belonging to the Bandage Man slipping under my arms and hoisting me up. The chanting built to a fever pitch. I pulled away angrily and ran for my life, not stopping until I was at my car. And when I turned around, there was no sign of a beastly man and his army of grasping hands. I drove off in a wild panic, crying and praying for hours. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. As always, stay spooky.